Before we get started, I just want to remind you that the contents of this video are 100% objective fact. My own personal opinions are not at play here. It is just the truth. And if you don't see your favorite comic in this video, it's because that comic was bad, and you should be ashamed for enjoying it. I'm just kidding. Let's look at some comics. Well, it wouldn't be a top 10 video if I didn't waste your valuable time talking about the runner-ups, so let's take a look at those. I've got here Big Game by Mark Millar and Pepe Larraz. I think that Pepe Larraz is one of the coolest artists working on comics now. However, this series, which was a massive summer blockbuster and blew my mind when it came out, kinda ended up just saying, hey, you see all that cool stuff I just did? What if I undid it? So in that way, it was kind of a letdown. Next is Our Bones Dust by Ben Stenbeck. If you've seen my other video, you know all the reasons why I love this issue. The only reason this is a runner-up instead of in my top 10 is because I've only seen one issue. There's only been one issue, so I can't judge it like it's an actual series. I'm only judging one issue. Maybe next year it'll make my top 10. It's the same exact situation with Bloodrick here. Another excellent series that I'm loving, but only one issue so far. So maybe next year we'll have this on the top 10 as well. This is another super great, really enjoyable series. The Sacrificers is another runner-up. Great series by Rick Remender, high fantasy stuff, really cool concept, really interesting characters, the dialogue and pacing are all really fun, but for whatever reason, it's just not quite hitting me. I don't know. The other series are hitting me a little bit harder. I don't know how to put my finger on it. It's still really great, and I'd love to make another video about this series in particular, but it's very narrowly a runner-up to my top 10. Danger Street here, I have been looking forward to collecting all year long. I love it when new issues come out. I love Jorge Forn's art. I love Tom King's writing, though at times it felt a little bit slow. It felt like it was getting overcomplicated and dragging a little bit, and that's the reason it's a runner-up, is because it felt like it wasn't moving forward at the pace I wanted it to move forward, and there were too many moving pieces for me to really get immersed in it. But it's a really strong runner-up. I'm glad I collected the series, and I'd like to have a hardcover copy of the whole 12-issue series if I can get one, but not quite in my top 10. Next, we've got the new Incredible Hulk series, which is much better than Donny Cates' Hulk from before, but just not living up to Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk series, which I loved. It's spooky, it's got some creature horror in it, and it's cool in that regard. It feels like almost fresh for the Hulk, but this one as well is just not hitting me. I'm not feeling a deep personal connection to it, and I don't feel like it's stretching the boundaries in all that profound of a way. I think a lot of other people liked this series, and I might be an outlier for this one, so I'm putting it on my runner-up list because I respect what it's doing, I'm just not loving it myself. The Holy Roller is also on my runner-up list. I've reviewed issue 1 and 2 for this series so far, and if you want to know more about him, you should go watch those videos. It's creative, it's fun, it's original, it's interesting, but ultimately it just doesn't have that wide scope that I need for it to be in my top 10. I've been loving Junkyard Joe. I'm a big fan of Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. I love the aesthetic of this story. I love how it's connected to the other stories that they're setting up and their whole The Unnamed thing. This story has a lot of heart. I really enjoy robot with heart stories. The reason it's runner-up instead of being on my top 10 is because even though it has a moral to it, even though it makes you think about things, it doesn't have quite enough thought-provoking content in it to deserve a second and a third and a fourth read. I'll probably read this again in a few years, but I'm not in a hurry to get to it again. I've got other stuff I want to read first. And of course, Saga has been going on for forever, but it's still coming out. You can still buy Saga comics in 2023, which is awesome. Honestly, I'm pretty lost with what Brian K. Vaughan is still trying to do with this series at this point, but Fiona Staples' art is absolutely worth the money. It's super fun to look at. It's really colorful. It's fresh. It's exciting. I just think it's neat that I'm still buying Saga comics. It's not on my top 10 because it's definitely not limited to 2023. It didn't even start in 2022 and lead into 23. It's such an old series by now that I can't call it a comic of 2023. And the stuff that came out in this series in the last year would feel so disconnected without the 50 issues that came before it. So it doesn't belong on this list. I just wanted to point out that it's still there and it's still awesome. Okay. Now we'll get into the top 10. Coming in at number 10 is World Tree by James Tynion IV. This is a really neat sci-fi series about basically the dark web, or what's underneath the dark web, if it was trying to possess you and make you kill people. As always, Tinian has a great sense of moment, a great sense of character, the pacing is excellent. The elements of science fiction in this series are believable and scary because they have such a believable backdrop of character and setting. In short, this series is doing cool, new, inventive things with the sci-fi narrative, and it feels very relevant and fresh. Fernando Blanco's art in this series is a little bit deceptive in that it doesn't look very complicated, it doesn't look like he's working super hard, but it is really solid. He's a very crisp, clear artist. He gets these ideas across. He's very good at narrative storytelling. So that's number 10, World Tree. Number 9 is Captain America because I am a sucker for the character and for J. Michael Straczynski and for Jesus Saiz, who is drawing this book. If you ask me, Jesus Saiz and Pepe Larraz are the two most exciting artists in the medium right now. And of course, it's so refreshing to have someone like J. Michael Straczynski come back to Captain America because for a while now, Captain America has been boring. It's like comics don't know how to handle a character that is just idealistic and good-hearted, good-natured, and just works for the greater good because it's the right thing to do. We're so focused on superhero deconstructions that we haven't had any good characters just do good things because it's good. And this comic is a breath of fresh air for people who have been missing good characters doing good things. I will admit, Steve Rogers is cracking a few too many jokes in these issues, and I think Straczynski needs to lay off that a little bit, but that's kind of his signature tone, so I guess I'm okay with it. But we've got young Steve Rogers fighting Nazis, we've got modern day Steve Rogers helping out his community, we've got this weird supernatural villain, which is kind of cool because Captain America doesn't get to fight too many supernatural villains, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. Like I said, beautiful art, really great writing from one of my favorite writers of all time, and it is so nice to be enjoying Captain America again after so long. So Captain America is number 9. Number 8 is Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers series, which, like I said in my last video about this book, I'm not a Transformers fan. But this series is great. It's nostalgic, it's bright, it's genuine, it's heartfelt. Really, if you want to know more about this series, you should just go watch the other video I made, because it's great and I don't want to repeat myself. So that's number 8, Transformers. Number 7 is Art Brut by the super team Prince and Morazzo. This was a really cool little 4-issue miniseries about this guy who goes into the alternate dimension that connects all pieces of art across the world, and he fixes whatever problems or sicknesses the pieces of art are having. It's a super fresh idea. There's a lot of experimental illustration techniques they're trying in the series. It's such a fully realized, out of left field concept. It's one thing to imagine this concept and design a premise for the story, but it's another thing to execute that concept this well. This book stands out from the pack because it is so original and so well done. And there's only 4 issues. You should just go and buy it. It's like $16. So that's number 7, Art Brut. Number 6, I'm sure nobody is surprised, is Rare Flavors by Ram V and Felipe Andrade. I also did a separate video on this one, but just to recap, we've got this centuries-old, if not older, creature that's going around and trying to cook the best dishes because it's obsessed with eating the absolute best cuisine, and one of his favorite things to eat is really well-aged people. So we get this vivid, in-depth look at human nature because this guy is obsessed with it, knowing that after we've deeply connected ourselves to the characters, he's probably gonna eat them. Part of my criteria for a top 10 list is the ambition that the writer has, how much they're trying to cram into a story, and then how well they're cramming it in and executing that idea. And this series has a ton of ambition. It covers a lot of topics, it's very thought-provoking, and I know it's a little on the nose, but there's a lot of flavor in this comic. So that's number 6. Rare Flavors. Number 5 is Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, from the ridiculously creative mind of Patrick Horvath, who might be surprised to see that I put his comic ahead of Rare Flavors, but darn it, I just enjoy the art a lot more in this series. I've already talked about this issue quite a bit in another video as well, but for those of you who haven't seen it, this is basically about a serial killer who's a very lovable teddy bear, and she's just really good at killing people and getting away with it. This comic is a really great premise with really great characters, really interesting imagery, and plot twists that keep you engaged. It's definitely one of the series that when I see a new issue on the stand at the comic store, I get excited because I want to know what's happening in the story. A lot of comics I buy, I'm like, well, I'm collecting the whole series. It's gonna feel nice when I have them all in my box and they all look so nice next to each other and I have them in my app all lined up, all in a row, and I'm not missing any issues. It's gonna be satisfying. But that's not why I collect this series. I collect this series because I want to read it. So that's number 5, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. Number 4 is Jason Aaron's Punisher, and I know that only a few issues of this came out in 2023, and most of it was 22. But listen, I bought it this year, and I was really excited about it this year, so it's on this list. And you might notice Jesus Saiz is also the artist for this series. And listen, I don't read Punisher comics, okay? I usually stay far away from Punisher and Venom and Carnage and Ghost Rider, all those 90s anti-heroes, okay? That's just not my thing. But this series has important developments in the life of the Punisher. It takes the character seriously. It has character development to it. And Saiz's art is really just, breathtaking. It's so good. So if you're already a Punisher fan, you gotta read this series. And if you're not a Punisher fan, this is where you should start with Punisher. It doesn't feel like I'm reading some gritty 90s anti-hero comic for dudes who want to feel powerful. This is a real character with justifiable action, not just for action's sake. Super cool. Really. So that's number 4, The Punisher. Number 3 is Mark Miller's The Ambassadors. Out of all the series that Mark Miller published this year, this, I think, is the best one. We've got this multi-billionaire scientist inventor who figures out how to give people superpowers, and they want to make a super team of purely altruistic people to represent the world, basically like the Justice League, but from different countries. So this miniseries explores her building her team of superheroes, while her crazy ex-boyfriend, who also figured out how to have powers, tries to shut the whole thing down. And it's Mark Miller, so of course there's some cynicism in there. There's some people just being jerks for no good reason, but it's Mark Miller. It's also really solid writing. The reason I chose this series instead of, like, Nightclub is because this felt a lot more fresh and the scope of it all felt so much bigger. And whereas Big Game, which was massive scope, was a really cool event, this series, I think, was a more profound story. Another super cool thing about this series is that for each issue he got a different artist. And all 6 of the artists he got are really great, and they do a stupendous job of portraying the culture of each superhero that we focus on per issue. So I loved this series, and I really hope that the series wasn't just building up to Big Game. I hope that there's another miniseries where we can see these characters actually doing their job. So that's number 3, The Ambassadors. Number 2 is The Deviant, because listen, I have just been thinking about this series so much. There is just so much to think about with this series, okay? I love what Tinian IV is doing with this series. Finally, an allegory that is relevant and that I can sink my teeth into, you know? And like I said in my video about this series in particular, Joshua Hickson's art is so easy to look at and so communicative and so evocative, and it really, really reminds me of David Mazzucchelli, and I really like that. And if you missed the last video, I just gotta show you this page again. Look at this page. It's beautiful. Look at this amazing work of art. Really, it is just an accomplishment. So I've already said a lot of things about this series in my other video. If you want to hear more about it, go check out that one. This is a great story. I love it. I'm super excited to buy more issues. So that's number 2, The Deviant. And number 1, my favorite comic of 2023. I look forward to buying every single new issue of this. I get so excited when I find it at the comic shop. It's from an artist that I had never read anything by until I started reading this series, Kaya by Wes Craig. This series is such a treasure. I feel bad just taking it out of my protective covering because I don't want anything to happen to this issue. I love it so much. The characters are lovable and unique. The world building is so full and vibrant and detailed. The overall concept is very simple. This isn't one of those super ambitious, wide scope projects that I was talking about earlier. But sweet baby rays, the art is so pretty. Every single time I read one of these issues, I stop like 5 or 6 times throughout the book just so I can stare at the art, because the line work is amazing, and then you add these gorgeous watercolors to it and it's so textured. There's so much love in this art. It looks so effortless. It's like Wes Craig was born to do this comic. It doesn't look like anything else on the stands right now, which makes it feel extra fresh. And it's got that same sense of heart that my favorite comic of all time, Bone, has. If you haven't read Bone by Jeff Smith, it really is the greatest. And this series feels just as personal and genuine as that series did. I love this series because it deals with things like hope and perseverance without feeling corny or forced. And I don't read comics because I like escapism, right? I like comics that reflect the reality we live in and make us think about it differently. And just like that Captain America series that I talked about earlier, this series is really good at reminding you that there is good in the world and you can nurture that good. But really, the art is just so beautiful. It's really, really pretty art. So that was actually a really easy choice for me to put Kaya as number 1, my favorite comic of 2023. If you haven't been reading this series, go get the trade. It is beautiful. It is definitely something worth having on your bookshelf. But really that goes for all, 19 comics I showed in this video? All of these series are excellent. They are creators at the top of their game. So even though a lot of comics from like Marvel and DC are suffering right now, we're kind of having a hard time finding the direction we want to go in that keeps the industry alive and also keeps fans happy, there are still really great comics being made. There are still lots of comics coming out now that are super exciting. They're just mostly indie comics. And I promised myself that I wouldn't become one of those dumb content creators who's always begging their audience to subscribe and like and whatnot, because that's so tacky. But you know what? If you did like and subscribe, then I could make more of these videos. And if I can make more of these videos, then I can start maybe interviewing creators someday, and then maybe we can get the ball rolling and the comics industry will become super healthy and I can be part of that. That'd be pretty neat. So would you like and subscribe, please? Or don't, that's fine. You know, I'm tough. I can handle it. No big deal.